In this video, we're going to talk about how you factor a trinomial by undistributing. So remember, we're starting with a quadratic trinomial in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. And we know from structure that it always factors into these two binomials. But we have to know what parts of each binomial give us the trinomial. So we know that the first term in each, the product of these two, will always give me ax squared when it's written in standard form. We also know that the second, the last spot in each binomial, the product of that will always give me c. Knowing this, it kind of narrows down our options for what these values can be. We know that b comes from the product of the outside plus the product of the inside. So now let's take a look at an example. So our goal is to factor the quadratic trinomial 2x to the third minus 13x squared minus 7x. Well, I just said the word quadratic, but when I'm looking at this, I can already tell that it's not because it has the highest exponent of 3. So that reminds me that the first thing that we always have to look for when factoring is the greatest common factor. Well, when I look at each of these terms, I see that they all have at least a factor of x in common. So I'm going to factor out a GCF of x first. So again, however you do that, you can either do it with division or think about it as undistributing. But we're left with 2x squared minus 13x minus 7. So now that we have this quadratic trinomial, we're going to go ahead and factor this, thinking about it as undistributing. We know that a quadratic trinomial will always factor into two binomials, always. So we know the product of the first two terms is going to give us the first term in our trinomial. So off to the side, I'm going to come up with things, factor pairs that multiply to be 2x squared. We have 2x and x. That's really our only option. We also know that the last spot in each binomial, the product of that, will give me the last term in my trinomial. So again, I'm multiplying to be negative 7, so I'm going to come up with some factor pairs. Because it's negative, I know my signs have to be one of each, and really I can only come up with 7 and 1. So what we do now is we go ahead and we're going to place these things into our binomials, and we're going to check to see if the product of my outside plus the product of my inside, I want that to give me negative 13x. That's the goal. So I'm going to start with placing 2x and x, since that's the only choice. And now I'm going to put my 7 and 1 somewhere. And at first, eventually we'll get better at knowing where, but at first you're just going to guess. So I'm going to put 7 here, I'm going to put 1 here, I need 1 positive, 1 negative. So for the time being, I'm just going to go with this, and we can talk about our signs later. I know that I have to have one of each because I'm multiplying to be a negative 7. So now I'm actually going to check my outside. So 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. 7 times x is positive 7x. Well, if I were to combine these two, I end up with 5x. But I wanted negative 13x, so I know that this is not correct. So that tells me I can do a few things. I could change my signs, but that's not going to help me because that's just going to change the sign of this. Or I can switch spots. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the 1 and the 7. And I'm going to try again. So we get 2x times negative 7 is negative 14x. 1 times x is 1x. Well, negative 14x plus 1x is negative 13x. So now I'm pretty sure that I've gotten it correct. Just a side note, if you got the right number but the wrong sign, that means your signs need to be switched. So to be 100% sure though, I'm actually going to multiply this out just off to the side to be sure. So 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 7 is negative 14x. 1 times x is positive 1x. And 1 times negative 7 is negative 7. That combines and simplifies to be this, which is exactly what I wanted. So I know that I did the factoring of the trinomial part, right? So now we just have to remember that this x is also part of our factor pair, or our factors, because it's the GCF. So our final answer would be x times 2x plus 1 times x minus 7. So this would be the factored form of our original polynomial.